All right, the two reasons I gave you guys those articles. Number one, that is sort of the lens of the class, the theme of the class, action movies and masculinity, and they work together pretty well. But you'll notice we haven't talked a ton yet about that. We've touched on it at different points for sure, but that's not my only concern in this class, I guess I could say. So on the one hand, I want you to know we are going to talk about action movies and masculinity in this class from time to time, but I'm also super willing to entertain all kinds of arguments that may or may not touch on that, okay? Second reason I gave you the articles. I wanted you to see from a couple different people's perspectives ways that people talk about this movie, especially through that lens, the lens of masculinity. Give you guys a little bit of ammunition, just you may agree or disagree with certain things these guys said, right? Well, that's the start of your own argument. Especially, I never know more than what I feel when I disagree with someone. Like I know immediately. I'm like, oh, this is why this asshole is wrong, right? So that's why I gave them to you. All that out of the way. I am, as always, wildly curious first if you guys have any thoughts on either one of the articles. Because I have thoughts, but I would love to hear yours. Do you like them? Do you hate them? Do you agree with anything anybody said? Did you disagree? Do you not appreciate this one thing this one guy said? I have some issues with one of the articles, for instance.
I thought the first one was a little pretentious.
Why do you say that? Was that the myth one?
Yeah, the one where the guy was talking about how he kind of grew to hate the idea behind Rocky as he got older.
Yeah, I'm gonna turn the lights on, by the way, because we're not trying to keep us away. Yeah. What about that?
Well, it just kind of seemed like he was trying to make the idea behind Rocky more political than it needed to be.
What do you mean by that? I'm not necessarily disagreeing. I'm just curious what you mean.
Well, he kept. It seemed to me like he just kept trying to relate the movie to race and class disputes.
Well, both of those things are all through the movie, to be fair.
Yeah, I know. I'm just
Okay. Yeah, well, like I'm with you to a point. Like my issue with the myth article, because it's interesting. I've read a lot, first of all, and I'm not bragging, but I say that to say I feel like I recognize his strategy, which is he's writing for a certain kind of people in Vice, and I think, at least in part, what he's doing is trying to say, look, we all agree, people who read Vice, that this movie is a little silly, you know.
See, now that you say it's from Vice, it makes more sense.
Well, but because in the end, right, he's like what he basically comes down to is like, I want to not like it, but I do, right? And that's really interesting to me. Now, I don't think that's all he's doing. Like when he says he doesn't like parts of the movie, I take him at his word.
Right.
But I do feel like at times he's maybe a little unfair.
Yeah.
Specifically, hang on. Oh, well, now I have to find it. This is what I wanted to do before, but it wouldn't come up for me. Is this it? Yes. Hang on. I can get there. Does anyone have any thoughts on the fairness of the myth article while I search? No? Okay. Break my heart wide open. What's your name, man? Lorenzo. Here, Lorenzo. Let me see. I was very close. Oh, okay. So part of the reason I like this article too is it gives you a little bit of a history lesson, and I mentioned this before. 70s movies generally, and this is a 70s movie, are a bit of a downer. I don't know if you've ever seen like Taxi Driver or Bonnie and Clyde or The Shining. I like Bonnie. Have anybody ever seen? You've heard of Bonnie and Clyde, like the story of those. Like they're kind of like bank robber heroes, right? You ever seen the movie? They're still bank robber heroes. They get shot to shit. That's how that movie ends. Like, I don't mean a little bit. I mean, empty the clip, 10 cops come out of bushes and just fucking unload. It's bananas. That's how the heroes die in that movie. That's 70s movies. There's a lot of like, go, but only so far. And in that way, it's weird because this guy claims, and he may be right in a sense, he claims that part of Rocky's allure at the time was that it didn't do that, right? Rocky goes the distance, as he says. And this guy, who I'm forgetting his name at the moment, kind of tries to spin it like this is almost out of bounds for the time. Like this is too far. For him to be able to go the distance with Apollo Creed is almost unbelievable. It's ridiculous. And some critics at the time said as much. I'm not sure if I think that's fair, though. For one, as I believe Samira pointed out, he does not win. He loses. That's the most 70s thing you can do, is lose. And we spent the past two classes talking about all the ways that Apollo seems to not take it very seriously. He's more worried about the business stuff. Rocky, on the other hand, this is the only thing he's got in his life. You know, he puts everything he has into it. And he still like that to me seems like maybe it's a little, they call it sentimental, they call it nostalgic for like the American dream. But at the end of the day, I don't know that it's fair to say that Rocky's journey or whatever is like impossible in the same way that like Iron Man is impossible. You know what I'm saying? I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts on any of that.
Well, throughout the whole movie, they lead you to believe that that's how it's going to end anyway. Because he doesn't think he's going to win. Apollo doesn't take it seriously. So it doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility that he's able to get a leg up on him and still last for 15 rounds.
I mean, it's impossible for me to take myself back to the first moment I saw the movie, probably because I was like 6 or something. But even when I'm watching it now, you know, I watched it for us. I go into that fight, I'm like, he can do it.
Yeah.
You know, like, the movie hedges its bets. But and I'm asking you guys, like, do you feel like, especially I wish Samira was here because I know this is her first time. She seemed disappointed, so I feel like she would agree with this. You're kind of led to believe he might pull this shit off, right?
Even when you know he's not going to, you're still sitting there rooting for him the whole time.
Yeah. But it's interesting to me because like all of this somehow gets wrapped up in questions of the American dream, and we started this conversation last time. Somebody real quick, help us out. What is the American dream? How do you understand that? How's it work? Start out as a nobody. Work hard.
Yeah, it's the belief that like anybody, no matter who they are, can like make it big.
Yeah, that's that land of opportunity business that Apollo talks about, right? And again, we talked last time, it's like, well, but how accurate is that? Are they just using that? All those business guys. There's that question of class that comes in, right? Does this movie adhere to that, do you think? Because Rocky loses. Shouldn't that, like on the one hand, sort of dismiss the narrative of the American dream? You say no. Why not?
I feel personally he won with himself. Would that make sense?
Okay.
Even though he didn't reach like the American dream, everybody, the definition everybody gives, he reached his dream of becoming somebody because he thought out of all the regrets he, went through, all the stuff he was going through, he thought that he wasn't gonna be able to thought that if he was to get beat, that if he was just not on to get back up, but he was able to get beat and still, like, you know, feel as if he went the distance.
Okay. Well, you bring up an interesting distinction. The notion that it can be a private dream versus a public one. Like collectively, as a culture or whatever, you know. Again, I think Samira voiced this. I keep going back to her because I remember that very first day she was like, he loses. What is this? Right? And that seems to be that collective, like your success should be ultimate. Knock his ass out, right? But privately, we have our own measurements, maybe.
Yeah, when I watched the movie, I was looking at it like, when I seen like right at the end, I seen it like, I was looking at it like it was me in the movie. Like,
It's hard not to, yeah.
So I was looking at it as if I got things, you know, going on, but I feel like if I'm able to continue, you know, going, continue to,
Yeah.
not basically not fall, not give up, like, you know, basically not give up.
Yeah. You brought something. Hang on. Oh man, there's a great quotation from one of these, and I really want to find it. Oh, there it's in this article. I'm gonna read it to you. Why is that not right? Oh, there it is. This was the essence of what I thought becoming an American man was. So, the article we're still talking about, he ties what you're getting at, he tries to tie the American dream in with masculinity. So, maybe you could say this is the American masculine dream, but this is how he phrases it. Exhausting, but worth it for the privilege of getting to spit in the face of every asshole who put you down. That was glory. Like working harder than you've ever worked in your life. And then what is success? To show all the people that doubted you, both your middle fingers, right? Like, that's weirdly the like masculine edge to maybe this private, but that's also a public definition. So I guess one other question we're raising is, what is success really? Because on the flip side, and neither article talks about this, Apollo wins. He succeeds. You know, he makes boatloads of money, which was like what he was worried about, right?
Well, if you go into the next movie, you don't know.
You can't.
Well, I know, but it's kind of a debate whether he wins or not because he's
Yeah.
ridiculed in the next movie.
Yeah. Well, the point I was going to make, like, without the next movie,
Right.
you get the sense that everyone, like even Apollo Creed, is like disappointed that it went the distance. He's a failure now, even though he won. Like, he didn't win correctly.
He didn't put on the show that he wanted.
Good. You're doing very well. Okay. So, I'm shit at taking notes on the board, by the way. I just want you to know that. But kind of what we're talking about here then is what their goals are. I like the way Rocky says it, but we could definitely define it better. This question of going the distance, you know, not getting like stopped or whatever. But Apollo is, I like that, a show. Put on a show. He calls it, for instance, a goddamn monster movie, he says. And he wants to be the monster that like wrecks the other one, right? Yes, ma'am.
I feel like that also brings back the classes, like the
Okay.
some issues with it because well, not the issues, but kind of like the difference when you're evaluating the American dream.
Uh-huh.
So Apollo, he already has the money, and now he can just put on a show and not really worry too much. So what he's worried about is more so the revenue he'll make. But Rocky, where he grew up in a very poor kind of area, you know, he's worried about more so just achieving what he wants. You know, even if he doesn't think realistically he's going to make it, you know, he's still going to attempt it. While Apollo's like, oh, I'll just get through it.
You're raising so many things so quickly. Okay.
Sorry.
No. So the other way we talked about this last time was spectacle. And it's interesting that you attach all of this to class, right? He has money, He doesn't. But see, the two things, I'm gonna limit it as much as I can. The two things you raise, like in the same sentence, we've talked already about how Apollo, we don't know where he came from. We don't find that out, okay? But in the movie, where he is now, we know he has this, and thus, of course, he has more opportunities. We know that. He has more resources. He can reach to other places that Rocky can't, okay? What's interesting, though, because that's a bit banal. Please, no one argue in your papers that Apollo has more money, so he's, like, better set up. Like, we know that. What's interesting is that he also has more public responsibilities, right? This goes back to, I think D'Antoine pointed this out, the 27 organizations or whatever the hell, and then he's talking about the governor, and he has all these responsibilities to people. That's how spectacle, that's how shows work. You put on a show by yourself, I don't know what that is. Sad, maybe. Rocky is all personal. He has no, does he? Does he have public responsibilities? And if he does, at the very least, they're different. Is anybody dependent on Rocky?
I think dependent is a strict term. I mean, I feel like there's people who are,
Like who?
well, like his community, you know?
That's why I stopped. Yeah.
Because, like, they're not really depending on him in a sense, but they want him to win because he represents everything they're trying to do.
So now this is a wide public, and this is a very, very, very local, right?
Right.
So he has local, and again, the responsibilities are different. His is to put on a show. It's that kind of show. You could argue Rocky's isn't a show. One of the scenes I wanted to look at, and I've already decided we're not going to have time today. The two scenes I wanted to look at, just because at the end of all this, I want you guys thinking about what you're going to write for the paper. The scene where Rocky first punches the meat. Couple things. Number one, he does that all on his own. It's not like Paulie thinks of it, it'd be a fun, no. Rocky's just like, well, watch this. God, that's an insane thing to do. But the argument I was going to make to you is, I think he does it for Paulie, in a way, in a super weird way. The other scene, which comes up right now, there's two of them, but one of them, we referenced this already, the night when Rocky can't sleep before the fight, and he goes to the arena, and the promoter's there, somehow. No one's there, but the promoter's there. Like a ghost, like a boxing ghost. And he says his shorts don't matter. Well, it doesn't matter that that's wrong. Let's all be honest. And he says, I'm sure you'll put on a good show. And again, he's part of this world, so I wonder if that language, if it crosses over. Because I don't know that you could qualify what Rocky does as a show. It's ugly. The way this guy describes it, I'm sure I wrote it down somewhere. He calls it ugly glory, attainable heroism. Like, it's not pretty, it's not flashy, it's not cool. Apollo is cool. So how would we define his local responsibility to his community? Just those people, right? The loan shark is there, Paulie is there, with the most expensive lady he can afford.
I mean, he's an inspiration.
Okay.
Responsibility. Whether he loses or he wins, he still made it to that point. He still shows all the people from his neighborhood that you can get here too.
So it goes all the way back to, what was your name, sir?
Trevion.
You're Trevion. It goes all the way back to what Trevion said a minute ago, which is, you see yourself in Rocky, right? For real, like, it's weird, man. Like, so it's like vicariously, you know, he's it sounds cheesy to say he's fighting for you. I mean, maybe you could say, but like, you see yourself when he's fighting. Like, you want to be the guy that goes the distance. You want to be, or woman, but you want to be the person that won't get knocked down and stay down, right? Like that whole, yeah. And again, what's interesting is I don't know that we can say the same for Apollo. So the people he has responsibility, Rocky, he has responsibilities to over here, see themselves in him, see possibility, right? It is possible. To quote the first guy, what's the word he used? Exhausting. He calls it exhausting. Oh my God. My wife got home when I watched the movie for this class. She got home right when he's drinking all those eggs. She just walked through the room and went, oh, and just kept, ugh. And it like drips down his, ugh. But it's possible. If you want to live that life, you could probably do it. You could probably do it. I don't think any of us want to, but you probably could. It's possible. Apollo, what you see of him and his life and how he works, we're so removed from that. You just can't, there's no path, right? And again, granted, you don't see what he does, so that's kind of part of the, but what you do see of his life, like there's a huge chunk of probably just God-given talent that, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you just don't, we're not Muhammad Ali. You're not born that way, usually. So, I'm trying to figure out a way to ask this. What then is his responsibility? We say it's wider, right? His is to the very local community. His is to everyone else in America, or maybe the world. Much bigger audience. But they're not really maybe looking for this. What do they get out of Apollo's whole thing, do you think?
Could you argue that his whole mission is the opposite of Rocky? Like, Rocky is meant to be an inspiration. Maybe he's meant to taper expectations, where he's meant to be like this imaginative figure of manhood that you can't attain.
I'm honestly not sure how I feel about that. Maybe.
Because without that, there's no show. It's just two average men going at each other.
Yeah, just hurting each other in front of us. Yeah. Well, okay. Here's what's important. I have a hang up, but I can explain it. So, if you take into account that Apollo consciously tells us he's putting on a show. He talks about the monster movie. He's putting, I keep saying he's playing a character, right? I think Apollo, we don't really see the real him up until the very last scene when he says, ain't gonna be no rematch, right? That's why I have a hang up, because I'm like, oh, but he's not that. But that is the only moment, maybe that, and like right before they fight, that's interesting too, because you're seeing Rocky doing all the stuff, just like, man, he's gonna get his ass kicked and just like getting ready. And you see Apollo doing the exact same things. That to me is like, they're not that different when it comes down to it.
Yeah, but he can't show the public.
Exactly. No, exactly. Both of those are very private moments. One is in the locker room with his trainers. The other, they're wrapped up. He's in his ear. And he's in his, that, no one else hears that. I mean, we do, but you understand. So you could start to argue, if I get loud, stop me. I just get worked up. But you could argue two things. One, again, he's aware of this. This is conscious. I mean, why you think that is, does he know this? Probably. He definitely knows that, and it's tied to that. But he's conscious of that. What does that mean? Well, that means when his private goals, whatever they might be, have to stay way more private than Rocky's. And this is what I think I've been building to. Because I had this thought, no shit, like 15 minutes ago, but it wouldn't have made sense then. Harmony, you hanging together? Okay. I know. It's more money, more problems. Like, that's kind of what we're talking about. Rocky, for all the ways that his life sucks, and it does, it looks awful, he's freer in a way. And that freedom is his private goal is it. Apollo, I think what we're kind of working toward is he has the very public goal, and we've talked about that. You get the sense that he has a private goal that he can't tell anybody. We can maybe do a deep dive and figure out what it is. I'm not saying we're going to do that, but I don't even think it's made super obvious to us as a viewer what his private goals are. That's how private, you could argue, they have to be. And the way this is working is it seems like that's the trade-off he makes. To play that character, to get that money, to have that wide public responsibility, is to take that little part of himself that is human, that wants whatever he wants for himself, and to just shove that as far down as he can. That's like the exchange he has to make, I think. That's wild. You guys are so good at this. Legit. I said this last time. I teach 31101s before you. This is just right now for me. Okay. What time is it? 4. Okay, cool. I want to make sure we get to the second article, but very quickly, I want to just ask, is there anything else from the first one that struck anybody as interesting, you liked, you didn't like? I won't ask who read, although I do worry about it. Okay. He does sum up Rocky's American Dream. He calls it a crisis of masculinity, too proud and myopically defiant to give up. He's too blind to the things that could hurt him to bow to him. That's his American dream, sort of masculine American dream.
Yeah, I wrote that in my notes too, that there's an actual physical symbolism for that in the fight. When his
Can't
eye-
see.
Yeah, when his eye gets messed up and he has to cut it open.
Yeah. The argument there would be, well, then now he can see. But it's like, I think this guy would say, he can't see that he shouldn't have that guy cut his eye open. He literally cannot see, but also figuratively cannot see that that's a bridge too far. Because even Mick's like, you don't want to do that. Yeah?
I don't know, does that seem kind of like a metaphor for like, he tried going to this and then he got hurt and they had to cut his eye open to like kind of see again?
Well, but
And,
this
people are telling him don't go there, so like a distance. for
Yeah.
Going to this.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is because I'm trying to put on this guy's kind of argument. What this guy would say is, and I agree with this element, masculinity, when you take it as far as you can, is inherently illogical. It's founded in a place of, well, what makes sense? Not doing that, right? Like that's how it would, like, if you want to seem more manly, you do the illogical thing a lot of the time. And it seems like that's what this guy takes issue with. Like, for Rocky's safety, he would not cut his eye. He would probably just stop the fight at some point. Probably early. But he doesn't. So much so that he goes further than Mick wants him to go. Mick seems like he's seen some shit, right? He's like, you need to stop. He's like, I'm not. And at one point he tells me, you stop this fight, I'll kill you. Right? He's like, we are doing this now. And you get the sense that Apollo is kind of the same way, right? So again, they're weirdly united in that. I keep pointing to this. I don't know if that's wrapped up in this for both of them or not. It very clearly is for Rocky. But again, we don't get to see it for Apollo. But it's interesting to me, all the ways the movie asks you to separate these two guys, what unites them. I think it might be that they're both stupid.
We're prideful.
Yeah, pride is stupid. Like, but yeah, but again, it's all trade-offs. Like, that's also what gets them to where they end up, right? Although again, to be fair, Rocky 2, they end up in the hospital. Like, that's where they end up. But, okay. Let's move on to the next article. I want to at least talk about that a little bit. He says, the title is something like, it's the most important film about American masculinity, something like that. This guy's a little nicer. It's also a different kind of article. He talks to a couple different people, so he's like got quotations from like scholars or whatever. You guys take anything from this one that struck you as interesting?
Well, it seems like he talks about the whole series, not just.
He does, and I almost didn't give it to you for that. But I still thought it was helpful. Not least of which because he talks about it in a little more objective of a way. Yes?
I was gonna say, compared to the two, because I didn't get to gloss over them, but
Yeah.
this one, I was rereading it because I did prefer this one more. And I will say the differences between how they view masculinity is something I think is really important. Because
Okay.
while he does talk about the whole Rocky franchise, the first article kind of saw it as something like, why have it, stupid, whatever.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about, that this guy is like, no, Rocky is true masculinity, integrity, showing emotion, and stuff like that. And that's something I thought was really important because the first article was like, masculinity is strong, no, all this, but it's like, no, Rocky really does show true masculinity in many ways, whether you want to talk about the physical embodiment of it or the complex, emotional, aspect of it.
Well, I run into this a lot in my 1102 because that's my class on masculinity. So many people, and it seems like the first article is kind of like, you hear the term toxic masculinity, which is a thing, by the way. That's fully a thing. But that's not all masculinity, right? And that's the weird trap that I think people sometimes fall into when discussing it. And this guy, the first article, I think kind of teeters on that edge. But he tells us too, he struggles with it. Like, he's not comfortable with that opinion, but that's what he has. But yeah, the second guy is much more, this is what Rocky, let's examine it. And yeah, the toxic elements he has, we've already talked about the eye. He breaks his nose. You could argue, this would be tough, but there might even be an argument for the way his life is in part because of his adherence to those masculine standards. Like, why is he a fighter? Well, it's because his dad, whoever that guy was, told him that's what he should do, as a man, right? But there's a lot of positives. He helps everybody around him. He seems generally to be a good dude, right? And that seems founded in that too. And that is important. I agree with you. I think the movie's got a lot to say for that. One guy he quotes in here, the second article, I didn't write down anybody's name because I'm bad. Like, I was naughty. Where does it say it? Oh, man. Well, anyway, I got too many notes, and that's my fault. But he says something about, he calls it like a crisis of white masculinity at one point. He calls him a poor, embattled white man, right? What I wanted to make clear for you guys, because even when I initially read that, I was like, I mean, yes, to a point, but you can't just shit on Rocky. He has a hard life. It's not just a crisis. His life is a crisis. But what he's saying there is, I think, it's two possibilities, okay? And either one of these is available to you. Either the movie takes concerns of the day, like from 1976, concerns that white masculinity had about other sort of encroaching identities. So obviously, yes, that's black masculinity, but that's also women. That's all kinds I don't know if you know this, but white masculinity has kind of been in charge for most of American history. I don't know if you knew that. It's one of those things. And over time, the more equal we get, we have been getting more equal, which is a good thing. That means that white masculinity gets challenged. That's how that works. What he's saying is that challenge gets viewed as a crisis. Like we're losing power, we're losing prestige, status, all that stuff. So these other people can sort of catch up, which is true. What I'm not sold on, and I'm asking you, and this is a super roundabout way to ask, do you guys buy that? Like, he's basically, the guy he talks to is basically saying Rocky is depicted the way that he is as a character to reflect anxieties of the day around white masculinity. That we're getting challenged by all these other kinds of people for like power, prestige, money, right? Do you think it's doing that? And I know that is a huge fucking question. I'm just interested in your thoughts.
I feel like he's reaching.
Maybe.
Like he's trying to make an
I mean, a lot of it is there.
Well, yeah, but I don't feel like that's what the original intention of the movie was.
Real quick, and then I'll come to you real quick. We are never talking about intention, okay? And I had to be told this too, a long time ago. Authors have all kinds of intentions. Directors, whoever, like Sylvester Stallone wrote this movie, which is wild to me, right? He had intentions. But once it's made and it's out there, it's ours. Your intentions no longer matter, right? That's how it works. So don't even worry about that. I agree. I don't think anyone consciously thought, well, let's tell them why white masculinity needs to be saved. Like, I don't think they made this movie for that, okay?
You know when this article was written?
Not off the top of my head. I can probably find it for you.
Because I feel like that would be part of the reason why he's reaching, because he's trying to apply.
2016.
Yeah, he's trying to apply the feelings of today to a movie that was made in this.
Absolutely. But that's all we can do as well,
Right.
to a degree. I will say there is a fair amount of evidence for like crisis of white masculinity in the 70s, but more on that in a second. What do you have?
I was gonna go on that, like, I was gonna talk about how you can't when you're evaluating the movie from the 70s, Rocky, when I watched Die Hard for the first time, before
Yeah.
I watched it, my dad went, remember, this was made in 1988, there's gonna be different things that you may not be accustomed to, when he showed me all these movies growing up. And so I had to understand that it was a different time, which doesn't excuse a lot of things, but to me, like, watching this as a kid and rewatching it, it does feel like a reach almost, where it's like, I can see the parts. I can see where they're coming from.
Yeah.
But in that time, I think it's just giving representation. Sylvester Stallone, and it's off of a true story.
Yeah.
And I can't really see it personally.
Well, what's hard here? Two things. Number one, there's all kinds of theories about different eras in which we've had like crises of masculinity, white masculinity in particular, because again, that's been the motherfucker's been like running the world, ruining shit. My personal favorite, World War II, and I've seen really good arguments for this. World War II was largely a response on the part of white masculinity to rising feminism at the time. Women are getting power. We feel like we're being feminized, even unconsciously. We need to shoot some shit.
And they made a game all, like,
They did? Yeah. I think that was later. But yeah. But my point is, it's not like this isn't never a thing. I forgot the second thing I was going to say. Oh. My quibble with it, because I think it's super possible, if not just outright correct, what the guy's saying, okay? My quibble with it is the class issue. And what I mean by that is, yes, Rocky is a white guy. And so inherently, he's somehow representative of white masculinity. Like that's how it works, okay? But he's also dirt poor. And I almost wonder, because on the one hand, crisis of white masculinity, okay. On the other hand, it's also a story about a guy who's poor in America. That's a different kind of crisis. Like, we read one as like a bunch of assholes, we read the other as like somebody needs to help that guy, like, and it's interesting that it can be both at the same time, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Does that make any sense? Kind of? Okay. So like these articles do a good job of covering this one. And probably, I mentioned this last time, because I grew up poor, I unintentionally always want to highlight this one. But I think that's important too, and it gets kind of swept under the rug when we only think about these people, either one of them, as like masculine archetypes. So I don't know. Anything else you guys noticed? I probably got stuff as well. Talks about action movies as a masculine mirror, which I mean we already pretty much knew, right? The sort of, at one point, I think it's toward the end of the article, he calls Rocky a model of masculinity. And he defines it like this. He's pursuing glory, he wants to overcome adversity, and he's reaching for self-realization. Now, I think we understand those first two pretty well. I was curious if anybody had an idea of what he's talking about when he talks about self-realization.
That referred to self-actualization.
Same kind of thing.
Yes. Then he's trying to prove to himself that he's worthy of these things that he thinks he should have.
Oh, succinctly put. Yeah, so in case not everybody heard you, like he wants to prove something to himself. And that something is, as you said, he's worth the things he believes he deserves. And I think that's kind of what you were getting at earlier, right? Going the distance for him somehow, and maybe we can define what that is, but is proving to himself that he deserves what? What does he deserve as a result of going the distance with Apollo Creed?
Self-respect.
Sure.
Because throughout the whole
He does
movie-
struggle with that for sure.
Yeah, through the whole
Yeah.
movie, he's looking at himself as a creep, as a bum.
He keeps walking away to sad music.
Yeah.
It happens a lot.
And even right before the fight, he tells Adrian and
Mhm.
Billy, I just want to prove that I'm not a bum.
I'm not some local bum or something, some bum from the neighborhood. Yeah? Yeah? Does he deserve anything else as a result of that? I'm honestly asking. I think self-respect is the biggest one.
Well, it doesn't seem like he's after money or anything material.
No. No. Because, yeah, he even, like, gives away the advertisement on his robe and all that stuff. He does get paid pretty well. They say how much he makes. It's like $100,000 or something? I forget. He makes decent money. I thought somebody might say he does it for, like, again, that local acclaim.
I feel like by getting to that point, though, he already got that.
Okay. By taking the fight seriously and training, like he's already earned.
Like he was, by the end of the movie, everyone thinks he's a hero.
Yeah. Well, I'll put it to you this way though: if he hadn't, like, if he'd gotten right to the ring and been like, nah, all that disappears, right?
He would have probably been worse than what he was before.
Yeah, even a pariah.
Because then he's not only a loser, but he's a loser who backed out on his one shot.
Yeah. So okay. I mean, I'm just saying, like, what gets wrapped up in that? Because again, it's this. I think he gets both self-actualization, but also communal actualization. I don't know. You know, it's like, okay. There's one other thing I wanted to say, but God knows I've forgotten what it was. Oh, all right. Last thing. I did want to point this out to you, and then with however little time we have, we got a little bit. There's one other thing in that last article I kind of quibble with. And it could be an issue of phrasing, but it's something I see a lot, so I want to point it out to you. Okay. There toward the end of the article, he talks about Rocky as a model of masculinity, and he's not nearly as unkind as the first article. But he does kind of intimate that movies like Rocky are the reason that we view men the way that we do. He talks about John Wayne in there, I remember. That's true, but I'm going to argue it's not entirely true. Okay? And again, this is a very old theory, way older than any person living, actually. And it works like this. what he essentially argues, and again, this could be an issue of phrasing, but then I would point out, well, then he should write better. All art informs society. And I'm using that term a little bit. This is the original theory, but that term is looser. You'll hear it these days, the media, right? I'm sure you've heard that tossed around, especially in our current political climate. The media is sort of the boogeyman for everything. They're the people that tell us what we're supposed to think. Like they make society. What he misses in his phrasing and what gets missed with that line of thought, according to this theory, is that this is a circle. Society informs the art that gets created. And then that feeds back, it keeps going. It's a cycle. My point is, I think he's right. I mean, they give the fun example that people work out to like Eye of the Tiger and stuff. I'm not gonna lie, that shit will get you going. A buddy of mine, he was in the Army for a long time, and he's not good at staying in shape. I love him. He's one of my best friends. He's not an in-shape guy. So to do that, he had a mix called Montage. And it was all the montage music from all the 80s movies. So like Eye of the Tiger, Gotta Fly Now, which is the one from like all of them. And he just had it on a loop and it worked. This guy argues because you see yourself in that moment like as Rocky or as whomever. And that's true. But the thing he doesn't really point out is that Rocky got made too. So all I'm trying to say is I'm not super concerned with the ways we may think Rocky may shape us going forward. Sure he does. I'm much more interested in how we got to Rocky at all. We ignore that a lot. Rocky didn't just come from Sylvester Stallone, right? Like, we made him. I mean, we being people that were alive in the 70s, but your parents perhaps. We made that guy. And we still do. We make the media. I'm just gonna. Anyway, all right. Anything else? Anybody else? Now then, let's talk about analysis. Let's try. I'm gonna do my best to keep this rudimentary. I say it like that because I assume all of you have some level of expertise in what we're about to talk about, i.e., you had a comp class or two, or you feel somewhat competent in what we're about to talk about. But I also assume that all of you are at different levels. So I'm just trying to let's find the foundation, let's kind of build from there, okay? To begin with, and again, if this is an insult to some of you, I apologize. I talk about body paragraphs the way I was taught a very long time ago. And that's the 3 I's. I feel like I heard somebody laugh. That's okay. Ooh, even my marker is bored. Look at that. All right. Given the sigh or whatever that was, I assume some people are familiar with this?
Yeah,
Okay. Well, I know you.
a few times.
Does anyone recall what these have to do with? Sure.
When I was taught it, what it was is you take length identifies to figure out the subject you're going to be talking about
Mm-hmm.
in one paragraph. The next one is to kind of like, if you're given a topic or whatever, that's the illustration of it. What is the topic about? Maybe bringing a little aspect of the top, whatever. And then interpret is your own conclusion from it. But then we dropped that in like 5th grade, so.
I've never heard of that before. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. So I'm glad we did. Okay, I'm just talking about body paragraphs. Okay, that's all this is for. It works like this. It'll make more sense after I do this part. Whether you remember those 3 I's or not, this stuff is what matters, okay? Every body paragraph needs a topic sentence, some kind of specific evidence. More on that in a second. And then most of your work is interpretation. You talk about your evidence, whatever it might be, in an effort to prove the argument that you have up top. That's how body paragraphs work. Now, when it comes to a movie, which is what we're working with in this class, there's a couple other things you should know. For one, you do not owe me timestamps in your citations. I won't really care if you do it, but I'm telling you now, you don't have to. That's not required.
We get extra credit.
No.
Oh.
All you owe me, like if you're quoting somebody or you're referencing a scene, you want a parenthetical, right? You just want the last name of the director, whoever it is. That's it. Nothing else. That's all you need. Now there's different rules if you were writing like a really big paper with like articles or multiple movies by the same guy, but we're not doing them, right? So that's all you got to give me. Super easy. Questions at this stage? What I want to try to do with the rest of the little bit of time we have, and I'm going to try to not use the movie, I'm going to try to use our memories, just to save some time. Any of the scenes, either a scene we've looked at already, and we've looked at a fair amount, or just one in your head, especially with all the things we spent the first half of class talking about. Is there anything you're thinking about right now you might want to write about, you might want to talk about when it comes to your paper? Because you can borrow my brain. Sure.
I really wanted to talk about the scene with Adrian and Rocky at the very beginning of the movie.
Very beginning.
Where
Okay.
they're in the pet store.
Okay. Oh, you weren't here that day, I don't think. Yeah, okay.
I just wasn't here earlier this week when we talked about Apollo.
All right, what about it?
I don't know what, it's not only the composition of how it is, like shot with the whole like cage and all that, and like the talking versus no talking, but I guess like the two characters as a whole, it just interests me because it kind of, it like predates how the rest of the movie's gonna go with Rocky versus Adrian. And in a way, I don't know.
What do you mean by predate?
It predates how they're like, I guess predate was a bad word for it. I guess their relationship throughout the movie does grow, but I really just appreciate how they are there, because it's almost like we said, the comfort that they kind of have without expressing that.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense. It makes
No,
sense to me, but
It kind of does. I mean, are you saying like you like how awkward they are?
yes. It's,
Okay. Why?
because their interactions with each other you just can't see with anyone else throughout the movie.
That's true.
It's like a special kind of awkwardness, like back in elementary
It's
school.
a very nice way to think about it.
You don't want to shove the girl you like into the wood chips. You're like, you know. Whatever.
Okay.
It's like elementary school romance.
Okay. So we got a little more specific here. Now, why do we do that? When you sit down to write your papers, and we're going to work on them before we get there, okay? It's a scene analysis. I'd like you to take on one scene, with some exceptions, but we will talk about that when they come up. But in this case, say you want to do that scene. What you would not do is write a body paragraph about the entire scene. That would be insane. And what you would actually end up doing is just writing me like a book report on the scene. You would summarize it. Instead, find specific elements to focus on. In this case, I've taken notes about this. I know them pretty well because I know what you're talking about. This is our evidence, all right? Our evidence in this case, what can we point to from that scene if we want to talk about, you characterized it as like an elementary school romance. What would we point to from that scene?
Comes by every day to tell a joke.
Yeah. Does he say that in that scene?
Well, no, you learn it by the end, I think.
Yeah. But we gotta stick to
He
the
was
scene.
gonna come the next day. He was making
Oh,
another
yeah.
joke.
Make another joke. Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, like the very first
Oh,
thing.
very first time.
Anything else we get in that scene to help us think about this aspect?
Kind of like the timidness of the girl versus like the kind of almost headstrongness of the boy.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. How do we talk about that though? For like, what do we point to in the scene? We got to point at something. I think we can, but I want to hear. And I'm talking to these guys, but this is up for all of us. We're talking about that scene when he first gets to the pet shop, right? I pointed out he keeps looking at her, and we keep seeing Adrian through the cage. But that's not what we're really talking about here. We're talking about just how fucking goofy they are, right?
I don't know how she doesn't really look at him when she's
She won't look at him. She barely speaks, like at all. The only line I remember from her, she says like "Good night, Rocky," but she like whispers it. Like I don't know that he hears her. Okay. Let's think about this. All right. So there's two direct ways to use evidence in a movie. The easiest binary I can give you is sort of text, which in this case would be dialogue, or visual stuff. And we've kind of talked about that. Like we've looked at a lot of examples about that. Obviously, if you quote a character, you quote them just like you would in any paper. If you're interested in a visual component, like how something is shot or just how something looks, we talked about that one scene with Apollo Creed, how it opens on the poster of him, and it's kind of always there. Like they keep moving around, but it's always there. Well, that seems important, right? What argument could you make that this image of him is always present in that scene? To do that, you would describe the image itself and its placement. We're going to quote anything. Here, I think we'd have to kind of do both. And what I mean by that is, right now, our general idea they have juvenile romantic capabilities. I think that's pretty fair. That's not an argument, at least not one worth making yet, but that's the kind of wheelhouse we're in. What we're going to point to is a couple things. Number one, you could probably quote them once or twice. So some dialogue. In this case, I mean, are we going to use Adrian's whisper, I guess, because she doesn't really say anything else? What's one thing we could look at for Rocky?
You could talk about how he mentioned like creeps while in Bergman kind of
Being a creep?
himself.
Yeah. He has to walk her home because creeps like come out. What I also like about that, and this actually is a nice segue. When he says it, I think it's that part of the scene. He's saying it, and it's cut away from her, and you see him in the mirror. I think you get to see him kind of realizing that he's a creep. How do we talk about that? Well, okay. Now this is a start. And again, I'm modeling it this way because any of you can do any of this with any scene, okay? We have some specific elements. We may need one more given but we're just trying to figure this out. What are we going to say about this? Like, it seemed like, I mean, and I'm paraphrasing your thoughts, but it seemed like you like this because it's endearing in a way, right? And it is. It is. It's a little sad, but it's endearing. The whole first half of the movie, I'm just like, oh my God, like it hurts me to watch these people. But we can't make either one of those arguments, right? When you argue something, it has to be worth proving. So you're not going to sit here and say, you know, the fact that they're basically socially inept is like endearing. It's like, okay. I'm going to zoom out and we're going to zoom back in. The big question we are always after, you can phrase it two ways. Where would I put it? I'll put it right here. So what? But that really only gets at this other thing. What does this text have to say about us as a people, society, or culture? Okay? That level of thinking is why they're kind of endearing. It doesn't really work, right? But we've talked a lot about maybe what these characters might represent in the movie, right? Adrian, I mean, who is she? She's also poor, right? She's from that same part of town. So she also has fewer opportunities. Her house is nicer, but you know, you could make different arguments about that. But you get the sense, I mean, sidebar, it would almost be impossible to talk about this scene if not in another paragraph you didn't talk about fucking bars. You'd have to talk about fucking bars. Like, it'd be impossible not to. But she's trapped by something, okay? Maybe we talk about that later. What does any of that have to do with how these characters relate to each other in this scene? He talks, apparently like a creep. She barely speaks. When she does, it's a whisper that he may not even hear. Why do that, do you think? Because, like, they could write that scene any kind of way. You know what I mean?
Maybe it's meant to show their relatability. Like how you mentioned, Rocky is always, you know, never getting to say the last word.
Yeah.
He's always left hanging. And maybe Adrian is meant to embody a similar feeling, you know, where she feels like she can't say anything.
Yeah. Okay. I can kind of take that and kind of kickstart this a little bit. So, one very common argument, for instance, the guy that wrote the first article, a guy like that might make the argument that Adrian is so attractive to Rocky because she's silent, because he can overpower her with his, whatever the hell he wants really, but his like masculine, sort of stereotypical energy. That's one argument that could be made there, right? I'm not saying I buy it, but I'm saying I can see it. It seems like we're trying to save him, at least with what you're saying. Is there a way to potentially, like, I'm not wearing my glasses, but I said that and I feel like you scrunched your face. Can you speak against that in any way?
What about
Like I'm gonna put that guy's hat on again. I'm gonna say, look, he just keeps talking. He's almost pummeling her with his big dumb words. We agree their dialogue is terrible. He does 97% of the talking. His dialogue is terrible. She barely responds and he likes it. He likes his women silent. He wants to overpower her. Femininity in the 70s. Get quiet, girl. We're going back to the 60s. We don't need your sort of feminist thoughts, equality. Get that shit out of here. Reasserting ourselves in this movie. Somebody out there, I guarantee you, has made that argument about that scene.
That breaks down halfway through the movie. That whole argument breaks down halfway through the movie.
Time out on that because we got to stick to this scene, but I am willing to hear that. The bigger challenge would be, can we address it in the scene they reference? Like, could you argue, and again, we're dealing in binaries, and I apologize, but could you argue that on a second glance, that guy is wrong somehow, or he's being unfair, or he's missing some information? Yes?
I think, like breaking it down. I think what I like about the scene is that it's so much, it contrasts later on.
With what?
Like how they are together, I guess. Like, yeah, they're still awkward, but it's not nearly as much of like a hitting the brick wall, you know, not getting through.
Yeah.
So I think like, I don't really like the argument, like, you know, if you were to put on that hat, like, oh, he likes the quietness of her because he would overpower her. If you were to like say he likes anything, I think it's just the fact that, like we talked about the first time we saw the scene, I think he just likes that someone will listen to him. And some will, I mean, yeah, she doesn't talk and she may seem disinterested, but it's the most he's really getting because everyone else is either telling him like what's for, or they're giving it their own opinion, and he's like, well, I can just sit here and talk and do whatever, and she's not really gonna, tell me that I'm wrong, but I'm not gonna like power down on her. Because if it were that, I feel like not that there would be more, kind of like aggressiveness, not to say
That's
like
true.
that,
It's not terribly aggressive.
yeah, it's more so just like it goes back to the second article, like he can talk about his emotions, he can get that part of himself,
Yeah.
and not worry about like the other men or people around him being like, oh, Rocky, what the hell?
Well, here's the question then, and I do want to save a little bit of time for you. You said it falls apart later. That might help us as well. I'm gonna knock that down one day. Why do you think Rocky's attracted to her, and why do you think she's attracted to Rocky? What do they see in each other?
Maybe for him it's the allure of the mysterious, because she never says anything. He doesn't know really anything about her.
Maybe that's very funny to me, because it's like, man, Adrian is many things, but mysterious.
Well, to him,
No, I get it. It's just fun, Like she's an unknown in a world full of knowns for him, in which all of his knowns suck.
yeah. And then the reverse for her is he's the exact opposite of the men she's used to. Giving Polly's a piece of shit.
Yeah. He does. He seems to represent, and I'm kind of pointing at you because you kind of nodded earlier. Sorry, but I think you would agree with this given the nods I've seen from you. It's like we're having a conversation. He hasn't said anything. Isn't that wild? But Polly is almost all the negatives of masculinity in the movie, right? And Rocky may have some of that, but you could argue she sees in him all these other like super positive aspects. Yeah. We still have to make the case that it's in the scene, and we might be able to. You had your hand up, man.
I was gonna say that they both are like each other's rocks.
Yeah. How so?
Like they both are like a safe space for them to talk.
That they both need.
Yeah,
I think so.
and like I feel like they get the most candy with each other.
Eventually. So here's what's tough. Look, we're drafting in real time. It's difficult. If we were to stick to this scene, maybe this would help us, maybe it wouldn't. To me, you might be better off paraphrasing some of what they say. Do you guys know what paraphrase means? Okay. Paraphrasing it, and then rather talking about how they are with each other, which is awkward, both of them. Awkward, unsure, not unhappy or even challenged. And I put that in because, again, if we were going to say, like the difference you were highlighting is Rocky doesn't talk at her. He's trying to talk to her. She's not giving him much. But you do get the sense, I think, you can maybe prove he is trying to have a conversation, which is an exchange, rather than what I'm doing right now, which is talking at you. See what I'm saying? Like it's a little more one way. That to me maybe would begin to let you prove. It seems like the idea we're after is that they equal each other in some way. Like, all right, I know we're running out of time. One of the questions you might want to consider if you started down this road is, why are they like this? They're adults. Why are they like this? They shouldn't. Adrian barely speaks to a guy that she's really into. Like, it seems odd. Why? Does it come down to the bars? Does it come down to options she thinks she has or doesn't have? You know what I'm saying? Again, kind of like Rocky. Are they both trapped in a way, and maybe that limits what they think they're even capable of? Or something. I mean, this is when you start to get into an argument. See what I'm saying? You would actually have to speak to these ideas now. That's kind of how this works. No matter what scene you pick, okay? And you don't even have to have a hard like decision on which one that is right now, okay? You could have a couple that you kind of like. You're like, I'm not sure. What I would ask, go back, think about those, maybe even look at them if you're able, and try to think about some specific elements that you could talk about. There's two ways to do that. The first way that I like is, does anything stand out? Again, if you talk about this scene, you have to talk about the bars. They're so there, right? The Apollo Creed scene, you got to talk about that poster. You have to, almost, right? The other way to do it, why does this scene interest you? What did you like about it? You cannot argue to me that you like a scene. That's not what we're doing. But if you mind that enough, there's a reason you like it. It did something in your brain you found interesting. You can usually get at a question. We had to do a whole bunch of work to get past this, and we got more to this, kind of ended up here, and we still need to sort of figure that out. But we're headed in the direction of an argument now. I told you before I'm really shit at doing this on the board. I am. Does that make some sense?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll talk about topic sentences next time. If you guys can do this, you will do well on this paper. Okay? Especially if you can answer that question, you'll be lights out. But like, this is what matters. We're probably out of time. Yeah. Oh Jesus. All right. I appreciate it. Next time, we had a discussion post, I think. Yeah, we did. Ooh, yeah, we did. If you haven't done that, you should do it. But then also respond to two of your classmates. Ideally, your responses won't be, good job. You know, like, if you think somebody crushed it, awesome. Why? More to the point, do you have an idea that might help them further think about that? Or like, oh, this other thing in that same scene, or you point this out, we didn't even get, I told you we get to your thing, we didn't get to your thing. This kind of tears that up in the next scene, right? You might want to consider that. We're all working with the same text. We've all talked about it a lot. All of you seem to have really cool ideas. So just help each other out. And then, I want you to bring something to work on. What I mean by that, something to do work. If you want to write longhand, you can do that. If you want to work on a laptop, you can do that. Anything. All right. Thank you guys. See you Monday.